Welcome to a deep dive. This one's going to be into Luma Maxima, the dominant queer escort.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So we're working with two pieces of source material that you sent over, the show's trailer
Okay.
and an excerpt from episode 4,
All right.
which is called Couple Times.
Yeah.
So, just think of us as your guides
Yeah.
through this world, kind of helping you unpack
Right.
all the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
Underneath what at first glance might seem like, just an erotic story.
Well, it's interesting because right away the trailer sets up something a little more complex, I think,
Yeah.
than just a story about an escort. Like,
Yeah.
it introduces Luma Maxima as, like, this
Right.
fierce, almost like mythical figure. She's not only, a provider of pleasure,
Right.
but also, like, a teacher, a mentor, someone who holds up a mirror to the client's darkest truths.
Yeah. The trailer really emphasizes surrender, transformation, pushing boundaries, and exploring those.
All right.
Really kind of intricate power dynamics that come along with desire.
Yeah.
Like you almost get the feeling that
Yeah.
Luma's not just offering like a service, but an experience
Right.
that's designed to push people beyond their comfort zone.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's more than
And it brings us to, what does this initial portrayal of Luma and the world she inhabits, what does that tell us about the podcast's potential exploration of sexuality? Like, what does it hint at? Is it something beyond simple gratification?
Yeah.
Does it venture into, like, self-discovery and maybe a little bit of danger?
Right. It piques your curiosity. But, enough about the setup.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the story itself with episode 4, Couple Times.
Okay.
So we're introduced to Chris and Anna, seemingly ordinary couple,
Right.
who have decided to, let's just say, shake things up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And that's where I think it takes a turn. Because Luma, initially, she resists working with couples.
Uh-huh.
Like, she dismisses their motivations as the usual nonsense.
Right.
Right. She seems to believe that they're just looking to spice up their relationship, which she finds cliche and uninteresting.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, she's not interested in catering to those kind of surface-level desires. It's funny because, like, on the surface,
Right.
Chris and Anna Dio seem to fit that stereotype.
Right. Exactly.
So what is it about them that ultimately convinces her to take them on as clients?
Yeah. What is it?
You know what I mean? There's clearly something more going on.
Yeah. Yeah. If you think about it, Luma is constantly talking about transformation.
Right.
So maybe she saw something in them,
Uh-huh.
even if they themselves weren't fully aware of it, that suggested that they were actually ready for, like, a deeper kind of change.
Okay, so now we're at Luma's house, right? Imagine elegant, intimate, with these touches of opulence. The setting itself whispers luxury.
Mm.
Exclusive, right. And then there's Luma. When Anna first sees her, she's immediately intimidated
Okay.
and actually steps back.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That small detail, I think, speaks volumes about the power that Luma embodies.
Yeah.
Remember how she's described in the scene? Sleek, black, leather dress,
Uh-huh.
tall boots, this, like, commanding silver choker.
Right.
It all seems very meticulously curated to communicate dominance and control and, create this aura
Uh-huh.
that's both alluring
Right.
and unsettling.
And it definitely has its intended effect.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, on the other hand, is described as being incredibly nervous and fidgeting,
Mm-hmm.
which immediately establishes how differently they're approaching this whole experience.
Right.
And then things escalate pretty quickly. Luma takes control of Chris, handcuffs him, places a collar and a gag,
Oh, wow.
ties him to a chair.
Okay.
It's a pretty intense scene.
Wow. So, I mean, this is where, like, the concept of consent within, like, a BDSM context comes into play. Because while Chris, clearly agreed to this on some level, Luma's dominance doesn't really leave much room for resistance. Like, what do you think might be going through his mind in that moment?
Right.
What motivates someone to willingly embrace that level of vulnerability?
Okay. Surrender. It almost feels like he wants to be completely overtaken. And then there's Anna, who's described as being frozen.
Right.
Caught between, their initial agreement to try something new.
Yeah.
And what I imagine is a healthy dose of shock.
Right. So their experiences are already diverging drastically at this point.
Totally, yeah.
Right. Anna is a spectator.
Yeah.
Whereas Chris is, like, immediately thrust into the situation where he has no control.
Right.
Which I think sets up a fascinating tension. Like, is he genuinely seeking that level of submission?
Yeah.
Or is there, an element of performance to it?
Right. Okay. So now we have this incredibly charged situation.
Yeah.
And Luma starts her seduction of Anna. But instead of using that same kind of forceful approach that she did with Chris,
Right.
she begins with these gentle touches, slowly building desire and trust before moving to more intimate actions.
It's such a stark contrast to how she handled Chris.
Totally, yeah.
He experienced immediate subjugation.
Right.
Whereas Anna encounters this much more gradual, almost tender seduction. It's
Yeah.
almost as if, like, Luma is intuitively adapting her approach to fit each person's individual needs and boundaries.
And it definitely works, that gradual buildup. It disarms Anna,
Right.
ultimately leading her to willingly surrender to Luma's advances.
Wow.
But then there's that line that Luma whispers, "You are mine."
Ooh.
Possessive, powerful, sends shivers down my spine just
Yeah.
hearing it. What kind of dynamic
Yeah.
is being established there?
It's certainly not like a typical expression of desire. I think it speaks to a deeper level of control that goes beyond just the physical. And remember, Anna doesn't resist, which suggests a level of acceptance, maybe even a desire for this kind of surrender. It makes you wonder, what is it about Luma that evokes this response?
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
We left off with Anna willingly surrendering to Luma, but we can't forget about Chris,
Right.
who's bound and gagged, forced to watch this entire encounter unfold.
Yeah.
And the scene really describes how he's wrestling with this whirlwind of emotions: arousal, jealousy, rage, even humiliation.
This is where I think the podcast really digs into the psychological complexity of these power dynamics. Chris's enforced passivity just like amplifies everything, making him both a participant and a captive audience in this whole unfolding drama. It's like he's caught in this web of conflicting desires, wanting to both possess and be possessed.
Yeah. It's a pretty uncomfortable situation, to say the least. But what's interesting is that Lima doesn't really shy away from those difficult emotions.
No.
It's almost like she acknowledges them.
Yeah. Right.
Even uses them to kind of guide her clients further into their exploration.
Exactly. Remember how she tells Chris to relive that moment of watching Anna with her? It's almost as if she's encouraging him to line into those feelings of jealousy and desire, to use them as fuel for his own transformation.
Yeah. She's definitely not afraid to push those boundaries.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the power dynamics for a minute.
Right.
It's obvious that Luma's in control.
Yeah.
But it's not like simple or one-dimensional kind of control, is it?
No. It's much more nuanced than that. It's almost like a dance where she's establishing the boundaries, setting the rules.
Yeah.
But within those parameters, she also creates space for agency.
Right.
Allowing her clients to make choices and explore their own desires.
And that's where the concept of consent, in a BDSM context becomes so important.
Absolutely.
It's explicitly stated that Chris and Anna agreed to this experience, even though it involved a certain level of submission, a relinquishing of control.
And I think that agreement, that conscious choice, is what allows them to kind of move past their fears and explore the depths of their desires in what feels like a safe and controlled environment. It's like they're giving themselves permission to step outside of their comfort zones and to discover something new about themselves.
Okay. So we've talked about surrender, power dynamics, consent. But what about the queer aspect of the podcast's title?
Yeah.
How does that factor into the story?
Well, on one level, it's simply a statement of fact. I mean, Luma identifies as queer.
Right.
And her clients come from, diverse backgrounds and sexual orientations. But I think it's also about challenging these heteronormative assumptions about relationships and sexuality.
So it's not just about representation, but about expanding our understanding of what relationships and intimacy can look like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, Luma's practice doesn't seem to be limited by traditional gender roles or relationship structures.
Right.
She's open to exploring, a wide range of desires, expressions.
Right.
Which I think creates space for a much more fluid and expansive understanding of intimacy.
It's refreshing to hear a story that embraces this fluidity without judgment.
Right.
without shame.
Right.
It feels like a celebration of individual exploration, self-discovery.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it normalizes diverse sexualities
Right.
and challenges the listener to consider the possibility that there's no one right way
Right.
to experience desire or to be in a relationship. It opens up a whole world
Yeah.
of possibilities.
So zooming out a bit,
Yeah.
what does all of this tell us about, the creator's intentions
Right.
with Luma Maxima? Like, why tell this story?
I think they're using fiction as like a powerful tool to explore,
Yeah.
these complex and often taboo
Right.
subjects,
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
pushing boundaries, challenging norms,
Yeah.
and inviting listeners to engage in like critical thinking
Right.
about sexuality,
Right.
about power,
Right.
human connection.
Mm.
It's a way to spark conversations and to, challenge our preconceived notions about these topics.
And they're doing it in a way that's both entertaining
Yeah,
and thought-provoking.
absolutely.
It's not preachy, it's not didactic,
No.
but it definitely stays with you,
Yeah.
long after the
Yeah.
episode is over.
Exactly. It's about creating a space
Yep.
for dialogue,
Right.
for exploration,
Right.
for questioning assumptions,
Right.
and expanding our understanding of ourselves and others.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, the most effective way to do that is through storytelling.
Now, remember that scene where Luma binds Anna after her encounter with Chris?
Right.
And it seemed to bring him this strange sense of satisfaction,
Yeah.
almost like this twisted form of revenge.
It's a really interesting detail,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It highlights how these power dynamics are constantly shifting, even within this, controlled environment.
Right.
And it shows that, even though Chris is the one who's physically bound,
Yeah.
he still retains a certain amount of power in the dynamic.
It's like he wants to be dominated, but also wants to retain some sense of control.
Yeah.
It's such a complex mix of emotions.
And that tension, that internal conflict, I
Yeah.
think is what makes his character so compelling,
Right.
He's not just a simple archetype. He's a fully realized
Right.
person grappling with,
Right.
these conflicting
Yeah.
desires.
Which leads us to that scene where Luma seduces Chris after binding Anna.
Okay.
The scene where she leans in and whispers, you are quite a handsome man. I can't wait to feel you inside me.
Right.
And remember how his erection falters initially?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think was going on there?
It's such a revealing moment.
Yeah.
Here he is, tied up,
Right.
having just witnessed his wife with another woman.
Right.
And his initial reaction to Luma's advances is hesitation.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of fear, insecurity,
Right.
the sheer intensity of the situation.
Yeah.
His masculinity has been challenged in a very profound way,
Yes.
and his body, I think, reacts instinctively.
But then Luma reassures him,
Yeah.
tells him how magnificent his cock is, and his erection returns.
Right.
It's almost like she knows exactly how to handle his vulnerability,
Exactly.
how to turn his insecurity into desire.
And this is where her skill as a dom
Yeah.
comes into play.
Right.
She understands the psychology of power exchange,
Right.
how to read his emotions,
Right.
anticipate his needs,
Yeah.
and use both words and touch
Right.
to guide him towards pleasure.
It's not just about physical stimulation.
Right.
It's about
Yeah.
restoring his confidence.
Exactly.
Helping him reclaim his sense of masculinity, even if it's within the context of
Right.
this submissive role.
And she does it with this like incredible blend of authority
Right.
and tenderness.
Yeah.
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 She empowers him even as she exerts control.
And then we have the scene where she commands him to fuck me on the kitchen table, give it to me hard, take me for as long as I need, and don't you dare come until I have.
Oh, wow.
It's intense. It's such a classic, power exchange scenario.
Right.
Where he's given permission to be aggressive,
Yeah.
take charge, but only within the boundaries she's established.
And that last part, the command to not come until she allows it,
Right.
just further reinforces
Yeah.
her control. It's all about delayed gratification, building tension, heightening the pleasure. When it finally arrives, it's like
Yeah.
she's orchestrating this whole experience.
Right.
Right.
Both physically.
Right. And emotionally.
And even though Chris initially seemed motivated by jealousy and a desire for revenge, he completely surrenders to her commands. He's following her lead, trusting her expertise.
Right.
Right.
Which suggests that he's finding a certain level of satisfaction in this dynamic.
Yeah.
Even if it's different from what he expected,
Right.
you know? I mean, this experience is challenging his preconceived notions about,
Right.
Masculinity and sexuality, forcing him to confront his own desires in a new light.
And all the while, Anna is tied up, watching, experiencing this mixture of gratitude, anger, jealousy.
Right.
Her reaction is fascinating because it reflects the complexity of her own journey.
Exactly. She's grateful for the pleasure Luma's given her,
Right.
but she's also struggling with feelings of possessiveness,
Right.
maybe even betrayal,
Yeah.
This experience with Luma is forcing her to confront some uncomfortable truths about her relationship with Chris. Yeah.
It's like she's realizing that their connection isn't as
Right.
simple
Right.
or it's straightforward
Yeah.
as she thought it was.
And then there's that moment where Luma looks at Anna with this knowing glance,
Right.
as if to say, "It's all right. He is still yours."
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I think it shows just how attuned Luma is to
Right.
the emotional dynamics at play.
Yeah.
She understands that Anna is feeling insecure.
Yeah.
And she's offering reassurance.
Yeah.
It's a subtle gesture, but it speaks volumes about her awareness of the complexities of human relationships.
It suggests that she's not just a dominatrix,
Right.
but also like a skilled observer of human behavior, maybe even someone who's invested in helping this couple navigate these uncharted waters.
Right. She's not just fulfilling a fantasy.
Right.
She's facilitating a deeper kind of exploration, both individually and as a couple. Speaking of exploration, we can't forget the ending.
Right.
Luma's invitation to Anna.
Yeah.
Next time, book me alone, and we can do so much more.
Ooh.
Classic cliffhanger that leaves you wanting more.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's such a tantalizing ending. I mean, will Anna take her up on the offer?
Yeah.
And if she does, what does that mean for her relationship with Chris? It's
Right.
like this whole experience has opened Pandora's box of desires and possibilities,
Right.
and now she has to decide what she wants to do with it.
It really does. Leaves us with a lot of questions. But, beyond the individual journeys of Chris and Anna, I think it's worth considering what Luma Maxima tells us about, the broader cultural landscape. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, this podcast isn't just a story, right?
Yeah.
It's a reflection of these shifting societal attitudes towards BDSM and alternative relationship structures. It's a world that's been largely hidden from view, shrouded in secrecy and taboo and,
Yeah.
But it's increasingly, I think, entering the mainstream consciousness.
And what's so fascinating is how Luma Maxima goes beyond the surface level.
Yeah.
Right? It explores the psychological, the emotional complexities of BDSM. It's not just about the physical acts. It's about those intricate power dynamics.
Right.
The negotiation of consent. The exploration of vulnerability and surrender.
Exactly. I mean, it challenges the simplistic and often, sensationalized portrayals of BDSM that we see in media, showing how it can be a path to self-discovery, personal growth. It also challenges these traditional notions of masculinity and femininity, offering a much more fluid and expansive view of desire.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the most powerful aspects of the podcast, is how it portrays Luma as this strong, confident woman who completely owns her sexuality and her role as a dom. She's in control. She sets the boundaries, and she derives pleasure from empowering her clients.
Yeah.
It's a far cry from, the stereotypical image of the submissive, objectified female.
Right. It's a powerful subversion of those tropes.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to a growing desire for more nuanced representations of female sexuality and agency.
Right.
Luma embodies a kind of power that traditionally hasn't been afforded to women, and she wields it with both confidence and compassion.
It's definitely empowering for both men and women who are exploring their own desires and boundaries. It normalizes the idea that there's no one right way to be sexual or to experience intimacy.
Absolutely. Luma Maxima celebrates individuality and encourages exploration within the framework of consent and mutual respect.
Which brings us to an important point, the ethical considerations of BDSM. It's not something to be taken lightly. And Luma Maxima doesn't shy away from those complexities.
Yes. Right. The The podcast acknowledges that there are risks involved in exploring these power dynamics, both physically and emotionally. But it also suggests that when practiced responsibly,
right,
and with clear consent,
right,
that it can be a powerful tool for personal growth,
right,
and transformation.
yeah. So it's not about, endorsing a particular lifestyle, but about opening up a dialogue,
Right.
and encouraging a more, informed understanding
Exactly.
of these practices.
Luma Maxima invites us to challenge our preconceived notions,
Right.
and to approach these topics with curiosity,
Right.
open-mindedness.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the intimate details of couple times to the broader cultural implications of Luma Maxima. But before we wrap things up, what's your final takeaway?
For me, I think it's the idea that sexuality is a journey of self-discovery, not a fixed destination.
Right.
Luma Maxima encourages us to question our assumptions, and be curious about our own desires,
Right.
and to embrace the fluidity and complexity of human connection.
Beautifully put. And I think that's a message that resonates far beyond the specific world of BDSM. It's a reminder to be kind to ourselves, to be open to new experiences, and to never stop exploring the infinite possibilities of what it means to be human.
And to remember that pleasure, connection, personal growth can be found in the most unexpected places.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Luma Maxima. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.